Welcome back to the SportsMax Zone. Chairman of the Football Association in England, Greg Clark, has resigned after a series of offensive gaffe during an appearance before the UK Parliament's Digital, Culture, Media and Sport Committee on Tuesday. The 63-year-old Clark described black, Asian, minority and ethnic footballers as coloured while answering a question about the social media abuse preventing gay players in the men's game from coming out. Clark said, "If I look at what happens to high-profile female footballers, to high-profile coloured footballers, and the abuse they take on social media is a free-for-all." When his injudicious choice of words was highlighted by MPs on the committee, Clark issued an apology. He later resigned with immediate effect. Clark's resignation comes just weeks after the FA sought to take the lead on inclusion within sport with the launch of its Football Leadership Diversity Code. Well, joining us now to discuss Clark's remarks and his resignation is our English-based football correspondent, Simon Evans. Welcome.
Hi, good to see you, Mariah.
Always good to see you and hear from you, Simon. So I'm starting with asking you, where do you stand on this? Do you think the FA boss, it was just a slip of tongue, or should he have, was it his time to go?
Look, I think in these positions, people need to learn the modern language and learn the right way of speaking about these issues. And if you're in the position of being chairman of the Football Association and you're going into a situation where you're talking to parliamentary representatives, you should be up to speed with the language. I do have some sympathy for older people in our society who struggle to keep up with the changing language that there is. So, but he's 63 and he's a public official. He should have been better prepared than that. But I think we should point out as well that, he's talking about a slip of tongue, which he apologized for. It is an unacceptable phrase that has terrible historical connotations in countries such as the United States and South Africa in particular. But his argument was he got a little bit confused because he hears the phrase people of color in the United States. And I think for some people of an older generation, sometimes, if we're being generous, we'll say, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult to keep up with the changing vocabulary. But in the kind of society we're in now with social media and the way people pounce upon mistakes like this, I think it was inevitable that he chose to go.
Do you think, of course, this error and this resignation highlights, or it brings in front of our eyes, the fact that we continue to discuss there's the lack of black representation in the top positions, of course, the hierarchy? Does this bring that into the forefront again? And do you see change coming where that is concerned with the FA?
Yeah, I think there is change coming. And ironically, Greg Clark have been trying to push some of that change. I mean, we should remember as well in his comments, he was making an anti-racist point. He made it badly and he chose some bad words to use it. But his intention was to talk about the problem of racial abuse online and also to talk about issues of increasing representation. So he was talking about the right things, he was trying to do the right things, and he made some linguistic errors. So it's important to say that he's not resigned because he's a racist, and no one's actually made a case that he is a racist or anything on that level. It's a different kind of mistake, and yes, there will be people who say it's time for somebody to come in with a very different background. And I think across football, like a lot of industries in Britain, there is a call for more diversity and change in that area.
Simon, you touched on something which I really have been grappling with since this story broke. I have the utmost sympathy for Greg Clark. He's caught in a time warp. You say that as a public official, maybe he ought to have been more nimble. It may point to the fact that he has been badly briefed, or he was not briefed by his handlers, which he should have been, and that he should be up with the lingo of the modern times, modern culture, and especially when it comes to talking about matters concerning race and prejudice. I have a lot of sympathy for him. And Britain is a society where I remember a former the chairman of a former committee going to the House of Commons, late Simon, and it was raised by someone across the floor that he was late, and the gentleman offered to resign. And the Speaker of the House had to tell him, well, don't be ridiculous. You're not resigning because you were late. You were late. Let's carry on. That's the sort of culture. But the point I want to make is this. Do you believe that Greg Clark found himself perhaps in an invidious position, perhaps weakened by his role in Project Big Picture, what appeared to be him being caught in a lie, coming out, criticizing Project Big Picture? Then the Guardian's revelations on these stories show that, oh, but you were front and center convening this meeting to talk about Project Big Picture. And that this slip of the tongue, this inelegant expression of phrase was just a straw that broke the camel's back. And were it not for the brouhaha around Project Big Picture and Greg Clark's seeming starring role in the stillbirth of that idea, that maybe he would have apologized and still have still have held on to his job today.
Yes. I think that there were other factors behind this. I think that if you have the goodwill of people and you have the support of people, you are more likely to be forgiven for a mistake like this than if you've been in a controversial situation like that and built up some opponents or and so on. And also, frankly, the media in Britain is always ready to jump on a mistake and hammer as hard as they can and get a scalp with it. So I do think, that the Project Big Picture thing will have contributed to the overall thing. It may be that in the somewhat febrile atmosphere of social media these days that Greg Clark would have gone anyway, even if he'd have had a good background. I wouldn't rule that out either, but there's definitely something to what you're saying there.
Yeah, I read a comment from Tyrone Mings, the Aston Villa defender, who has aligned with the FA to do a project that speaks to reforming the game and bringing more BAME. See what I did there? Bringing more BAME personalities into the picture. And I'm wondering if the people at the FA believe that they were led by a bigot, someone who perhaps was a closet racist, or that they were being led by someone who just had an unfortunate, inelegant turn of phrase at the bad moment in the FA's business.
Yeah, I've never heard anyone before yesterday suggest that Greg Clark was a bigot or a racist. I mean, I think, if you look at what he was actually, the context of what he was actually trying to say, he wasn't making racist points. He used a very out of date phrase. It comes from another era. And there are some people, in everyday walk of life who will say, hold on a minute, what is the difference between saying colored person and person of color? Now, I don't really like using any of these phrases personally. And, I think we've all become very awkward about it. I mean, BAME, now there's suggestions, you just use that phrase BAME there, black and minority ethnic. It's the kind of language you might use in an academic journal when you're doing a review, sociological review or something. I have never heard anyone ever refer to each other or a friend. I've got a BAME friend. No one ever says that. But it's a language that's in there. How do you use that phrase, which is also in some ways a controversial phrase, because some people argue that you're grouping all sorts of different people in there as one catch-all phrase, and you're talking about people from very different backgrounds and ethnicities. Had he used that phrase, he'd have been fine.
Yeah.
But so I must admit, I do have a degree of sympathy for him in the sense that I don't think he had any ill intent there. There was nothing malicious about it. He was arguing against racism in his words, in the same way that his comment about the life choice of gay football.
Yes.
He was actually talking about the life choice of coming out of gay football. And saying that he thought they would be accepted in the dressing room these days. It was a positive comment in that sense. Absolutely
so. The night of the long knives catching Greg Clark in the day. Thank you very much for your time, Simon. All the best to you.
All right, cheers.
Good. All right, we are out of time. Do we? Yes, we are. Let's go to break.